The secret sauce the whole time has just been to care about your artist's music. And they will sense that and they'll come back to you. If you can find people that inspire you, or if you can find things that you love about what people are doing, if you can genuinely find that in your heart to care about what people are doing, they will appreciate that because their music is so important to them.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Dane Myers, a producer and owner of CustomTracks.com, a recording studio in Orlando, Florida that offers online recording and production services to artists anywhere in the world. Dane crossed my radar a while back when he launched the company, and I got a chance to check out his site and see his promo video on YouTube. Custom Tracks offers artists the chance to make their record with professional musicians even when they don't have access to musicians locally. Anyone can send in their song to Dane, and his team will produce and record a finished production that transforms the song from a simple iPhone demo to a polished, mastered mix ready for release. While this is not a brand new idea, in fact, I've thought about this sort of thing many times, and perhaps you have too, what I really appreciate about Dane is the professional way that he's put this all together. His website looks totally pro with all the necessary info you would want to know if you were going to record a song yourself, and it includes great before and after examples and well-produced promo videos to let you know what is possible and get you familiar with the musicians. Basically, Rockstars, Dane has done an excellent job of taking advantage of the power of the internet to create a modern production studio with the potential to succeed and grow over time. This is exactly the sort of thing that gets me excited about the possibilities for the future of recording studios in the age of the internet. Anyone, anywhere can create a business model that allows for a career in professional recording. All it takes is careful and smart attention to detail and the willingness to put in a ton of hard work to create it. Then, just don't give up. Here's a quote from Dane's own website. Several years after founding local singer-songwriter recording studio Wholehearted Productions and producing numerous tracks for aspiring local artists, Dane realized a big obstacle all of his artists faced in getting the quality of music they wanted was a lack of access to professional studio musicians. Now, after leaving university, Dane is bent on changing the ways people think about recording, putting the focus on quality, performances, and putting top-shelf musicians back in independent music production through CustomTracks.com. Rockstars, I hope this will be an inspiring episode for you, whether you are just starting out in recording or you are a veteran producer looking for a new way to build your business. I'm psyched to invite Dane Myers to Recording Studio Rockstars. Dane, my friend.
How you doing?
Are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready to rock.
Sweet, man. Well, welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. You know, I've kind of given an introduction, but can you fill in some of the gaps in your own words and let us know more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I started out in my freshman year of high school. I got a Tascam US 1641, which was, it took me a year and a half to figure out how to set up. But that's kind of where I got started, was Friday nights with Little Caesars pizzas and 2 liters of Sierra Mist. Just didn't get invited to things, and we would camp out in the basement and make tracks. And so that was kind of what we would do in high school. And then went to college for a little bit for information technology and decided, well, I don't want to do that. I really still want to just do music. And so after a couple semesters, left school and started a home studio for singer-songwriters that's really, really grown and been a really great thing for us, and have kind of taken some of the frustrations we noticed from what we were experiencing locally and figured we could solve this in a kind of global way for people wherever they were. And so kind of combining my IT background with just the tech side of things, with a lot of love for music and a lot of appreciation for its role in our society and some experience producing it, started doing what we're doing now.
Well, I think what you're doing is really cool, man. And when it first crossed my radar, like I said, I was very impressed with the way you had put it all together. It seemed like it was a really clear, simple message. It's interesting to hear that you went to IT and studied that first, because obviously there is some understanding of the internet and probably a little bit of programming to put all this kind of stuff together. What do you want to say about that? Do you feel like what you're doing in terms of trying to bring music and the internet together requires a great deal of that? Or do you think it's something that is accessible to more people than they might realize?
Yeah, I don't think anybody needs to go to school for IT necessarily at all. And I think that what we've come to find important is that, like, as you're creating art, whether that's like, you know, your music, or if you're, I guess, somebody that's putting together a studio to help other people create their art, that the continuation of your art extends through your website and it extends through the technology that you need to reach somebody wherever they are. But fortunately, a lot of the information is available kind of anywhere you go. There's a lot of great resources online for figuring out exactly how to do what you need to do.
And so how old are you now, Dane?
I'm 23.
23. That's awesome, man. Very impressive to hear that you put so much together at that age. I was still trying to figure out how I could just get a beer at 23, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good group that I kind of fell into here in Orlando, and they kind of helped me keep it between the lines most days.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about, one of the questions I like to ask people is, what did starting out in recording smell like to you? I think we already got the message because it probably smelled like Little Caesar's pizza, right?
That's right. That's right. Grease.
Grease. But what about, like, what were you surrounded by? The Tascam, I don't know that particular piece of gear. Is this one of the sort of all-in-one digital multi-track recorders that you're talking about? Or was that a 4-track?
No, it was like a 16 in, 4 out. It had 8 pre's on it. And I got it because I was a drummer originally. And I was really just thrilled and overwhelmed by the idea of being able to record my drums in multi-track. And it had a couple of like line ends on the front and 8 pre's for drums. So I was on cloud 9, but man, like, it shipped with Cubase. And like, I can just remember I probably spent like, just hours and hours and hours with the latency of it and trying to get, like, there was only like, like lowest latency, low latency, medium latency. And then when I got Pro Tools, like, it has to be a certain, like, either, 1024, like, it has to be a certain number. So they wouldn't work together. And so it was just always like, I got a really quick intro to the realities of most of working in the studio for the first long time is troubleshooting things that should work but don't.
Trying to get them all hooked up. So you had the piece of hardware, then you got the software for the computer, and you discovered that they wouldn't talk to each other.
Right. And they were in California, so I would like get up first thing in the morning and not be able to call them because they weren't open. And it was, they probably didn't like me very much.
Yeah. And at that age,
no idea what I was doing.
Maybe first thing in the morning for you at that age was like, noon or something anyway.
Yeah. You'd think, I guess. Yeah.
Well, so that's cool, man. So you sort of transitioned over from that into the computer. And when you started learning the audio stuff, were YouTube was available to you at this point, or did that sort of come along later?
I think it was available, but I don't think the culture had caught up with me yet where I realized how much was available. So it was like friends and people around that were like, oh, like, these are plugins. Check out all of this. And you're like, what? I didn't know this was here.
I know. Plugins are pretty exciting. It's kind of fun to discover all that stuff. It still is for me now.
Yeah.
Even though I know I maybe don't need a whole lot more plugins in there. But there are definitely ones that I still want to get.
Yep.
Very cool stuff, man. So tell us more about, like, kind of launching this iteration of the studio, or maybe if you want to go back and talk a little bit about, your first experiences recording before you, sort of the learning process for you about making a record. Why don't you start there?
When I got out of high school, I got to tour a little bit with a band out of Georgia, and the singer in that group it was like the first. I came from a small town, so I didn't know anybody that like had done with music, like kind of what I wanted to do, which was make something that was sustainable and that I could kind of get up and work on every day. And the singer of this band had a studio. It's called the Fish Tank in St. Augustine. And so, like, a lot of like late night driving around, keeping each other awake, just talking shop. I had wanted to go to Berkeley, or like I auditioned for Frost at UM, at University of Miami. I was thinking, like, I'm going to leave. I'm going to not do IT. I'm going to go to school for music. And that's just the path. Cause I had been valedictorian in high school. So it was a given that I like had to go to college. And I was all set on like going to some private university and getting a good education somewhere. And this guy that I was on tour with was kind of like, you know, why, man? You're going to be in so much debt. Like you can learn all of this stuff off YouTube or through networking. You know, he told me like, take your leftover scholarship money and get on Craigslist and buy a microphone and a preamp and just start trying to find people to record. And he said, there's an ass for every seat. Like just start doing it and start trying to work it out. And he really inspired me. He really got through to me when I kind of thought the narrative dictated that I go a different direction. And I think that was really the beginning of it.
Well, so that's super cool, man. I love hearing that story because it's one of those ones that you hear people suggest as an alternative to college. It's like, man, if you just took the money and invested it in a studio, you could get this great education. And how cool that did you really actually get a chance to take your scholarship funds and go buy a mic and a mic pre and just kind of start learning how to record that way?
Yeah, I had a place I could live without rent in Orlando for a few months. And so I took my like housing money and got a or Audio Technica 4050 and a LA 610 off Craigslist for like, you know, 12 or $1,300 or something like that altogether. Nice. And then somehow convinced this. I recorded like a couple of friends and used that to get somebody to pay me $75 a song to do a folk record for them.
Yeah.
And and that was the beginning of it.
So what did that feel like when you were doing that first stuff? Were you did you have anybody look at you like, dude, what are you doing? Did you have to did you feel like you knew this was the right thing to do, or did you feel a little bit scared as you went into this?
Man, I just knew I loved it. I mean, like by that time I was really into the YouTube thing, and I didn't have internet where I was living for free. So I would go down to someone else's front porch and use their Wi-Fi to download a bunch of YouTube videos and then come back and watch them all and try it all in Pro Tools. And it was great. Like the people that I was recording, I was really upfront with, and, you know, told them like, this is what I've done so far. I'm going to charge you something super reasonable, but like, I'm new at this. So like, I'm going to do the best I can, but I wasn't telling them I was anything special. And they were happy with that. And they were usually pleasantly surprised at the results going in. So that fueled me.
That's cool, man. So how did you initially find people to start making music with and recording like that?
Well, I had been playing in some bands and stuff, so I had some friends that I could record from free. And then I think it was just the first person I recorded was off Craigslist. And this is just kind of like, you know, I wasn't really like trying to make get enough people to make this a business. Like I was kind of just like, I was still playing some gigs, like I sing and play guitar and stuff like that. So that's how I was kind of like paying my bills or whatever. But yeah, I just kind of Craigslist pick up some freelance stuff and start building a portfolio.
Okay, so then were you also sort of doing odd jobs at the same time? I mean, you know, what's your attitude towards delivering pizzas when you start out?
Yeah, I drove Order Up a lot when I was starting Custom Tracks. So like that promo video that you saw with the studio and the person at their desk singing and stuff like that, that was funded by driving Chick-fil-A deliveries and stuff like that.
Wow, so cool, man.
Which is so great now in this day and age where like you can just pick up, you know, because those are all, it's like Uber, you know, Uber, my car's too old to drive Uber, but that's a great thing if you're trying to start a project because you can just pick up work when it's getting close to the end of the month and you need to pay your rent, and you can devote as much energy as you can to like what you're trying to build. But then if you need to pick up the slack, you can pick up some gigs, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. And I love the fact that it sort of implies that the only one responsible for your schedule is yourself. You know, you can kind of, there's sort of not an excuse to not say what's going to be happening for yourself with work and with income.
Yeah. It really is a cool, well, I mean, it's also frustrating because then the only thing you have to be frustrated with is yourself, but
yeah. Well, so let's talk about that for a sec too. What did you have as far as friends or family or, you know, people that were helping push you along through this process as you're beginning to create your new business idea? And, you know, maybe were there times, we're getting to some of these other questions, like, were there times where you felt like you were kind of losing sight of it and you needed a good kick in the ass to kind of get back on board?
Yeah. When I first left school, I didn't like, we're like, we don't want to do this. We don't know what we can do, but we're going to, you know, Christian was in Tallahassee at FSU and he broke his lease and moved down when I dropped out of school, and we just moved in somewhere, and we're like, we're going to figure it out. We got money for a month and we're going to sort it out. And I think I started playing cover gigs right away. I started gigging as a musician. And I think this is like a good thing for people that are gigging, definitely, but also for people that are in the studio business. And that's that, like, I left school because it wasn't what I really believed in doing. And then I was doing something in music, but it still wasn't what I really believed was worth doing and what I like got excited about.
Right. You didn't want to just be a gigging musician.
Yeah. Well, and I like gigging, but like for me, like music was such a big part of my life because of the connection that it had with me and the role that it played in my life. And like, if you're a cover gig playing musician, like to me, I just felt like I'm just like a musical alcohol salesman. Like nobody's actually listening to me. This is just like something to put on the sign. Like this is a warm body gig. And this isn't what I left, like my life to do. And so it's kind of that process of just like head checking myself or, head checking yourself and being like, all right, this kind of looks like it, but like, am I really being honest with myself about what I'm building? Because the other thing about that is like, you're worth $150 a night for the rest of your life. You're not really building your brand as a cover musician.
Right.
So that kind of became a passion suck as I got into it. And I started playing with a band and like, getting them on board. And like, that just added more size to the passion suck, like having to like draw a band into this and manage that whole thing. And, so that kind of was like a side path that I kind of went down and would probably not go down again if I did it over. But
okay, so you're doing that. It's kind of a classic beginning. It's like you're playing the music, you're getting in a band, you're playing gigs on stage, and then you started to have this idea about starting the business. So was the first thing you wanted to do an online business as far as recording, or did you want to just sort of open a studio and start making records that way first?
Yeah, we had always, because we had this really deep love from playing in the basement and recording stuff in high school. And like that kind of energy, like that creative just freedom was really a big motivator, I think. And like as a musician, as an artist, I noticed that there weren't any studios that I felt like really cared about my music. Like I just didn't feel like my music was cared for when I took it a lot of places. Like nobody asked me like, what is this song coming from? Like, we never like took a walk and like, kind of got inside the story of what we were making.
And after all, you do live in Orlando, Florida, so it's not a bad idea to take a walk.
Yeah. Yeah. It's usually pretty good weather. It can be a little bit warm, but all along the way, we had kind of been like going to coffee shops and handing out like cards for our studio. But, we kind of like got more focused on that because that's where I felt like I was really able to connect with people more through music, was through producing, local artist stuff. And I kind of gravitated towards that and kind of away from the gig thing for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So the gig thing was sort of a bit of an important failure for you because you realized that you were headed in this direction that you didn't want to go. And you kind of, revamped and kind of redirected yourself. Was there sort of an aha moment for you as far as opening the online side of your recording business?
I think there was, I got really involved with the startup community here in Orlando, and there's like a really cool tech startup scene around here, and a friend told me about it. And I'd kind of been hanging around that community, which is really empowering because it's all about like, people have ideas, but it's also about how to make your ideas impactful. And there's a framework to that, and it's kind of a science, and just learning that was really inspiring and empowering. And then, we were kind of running into the same problems all the time with our local artists where they would have a record and they had, good songs and they were talented, but then they'd want to get all their friends to play on their records.
Yeah.
And because, like there wasn't really an affordable pro option. And I ran into this making my own music because it was like, well, we can have like a real musician and set up the drums and mic everything up and, hopefully get some good takes from this guy and then edit it. Or I can just pound it on my keyboard right here and it'll take 30 minutes. And when you're playing hourly, like that's a really difficult situation to maintain your integrity in.
Yeah.
And so we would, kind of face that all the time with our local people. And at the same time, from gigging, I was a part of this network of like really talented musicians who knew other really talented musicians. And I was like, well, these folks, even though they can play their faces off and they're, like maybe they're on tour and they come back for a couple of months, they don't have enough work when they're back. Like they could definitely use more, especially studio work down here. So I was like, well, there's kind of this two-sided market here where half the people want more work and the other half the people want their records to stand out and be something that people will share. So let's let's kind of try to facilitate this, for artists like this, wherever they are.
Okay, so very cool. So you've got local musicians, people that are wanting to make records, but they don't really know pro musicians. They are just, reaching out to their friends or bandmates to try and fill in the band in the studio. And I know what that's like myself too. I see it happen all the time. I've seen it happen here just recently. Sometimes it can go well. Sometimes you do have bands that play together and there's a dynamic that, only exists when the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But
Absolutely.
a lot of times you have musicians that, they just don't quite understand the finer points of putting it all together in the studio yet. And you spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to work around all these problems that kind of don't need to be there musically in the song during the production. When you get a chance to work with professional musicians or really experienced, talented musicians, they know how to get to the right answer for production in a song a whole lot quicker.
Yeah, and it changes what's tracked in Pro Tools, but it also really affects like the morale and the motivation and the gumption during the session. Because when you're like, just everything you record is gold, like you feel like you're onto something. And when you're spending most of your time, editing, you're like, I feel like I'm faking it.
Right. Well, there's an expression for that. They call it polishing a turd. You can. They said this in school. You can only polish it so much before you just get shit all over the place.
Yeah, or you just get polished.
Yeah, or you just get polished. All right, so that's a pretty easy concept for everybody to understand, I think. Now let's kind of dig into that for a sec. So you have this idea, you want to bring in these pro musicians that are coming in off the road and they're in town for different times and stuff like that. Talk a little bit about the challenges in your own mind as you're thinking of this concept. I know that there's a chance that you had this internal dialogue where you're thinking of the idea. You're like, man, this is such a cool idea. That would be so cool. But then, at least this is the way my brain works, I start overthinking it and I come up with all the ways it's not going to work. And then my head hurts a little bit. Talk about how you sort of worked through that. How did you figure out how to coordinate everybody and get past the initial concerns of just simply how do we schedule everybody? How do we make this thing work?
I think one of the things you have to accept is that you don't know, like you have to be able to say this might not work and like still go give it a try,
Yeah.
But for me, like we started really slow with it. So it was easy and it was really exciting at first. Like the musicians really liked the idea. So there was just like a lot of good juju. Like everybody was kind of willing to come in and do like one session, which the way our pricing works really doesn't make sense, long term for the musicians.
Yeah.
And so there was, a fair amount of that kind of stuff. Now we have an app built that's really nice. Like I have a friend of mine that I played in a band with that started working at a tech company. And we just played music together for so long that like we have a really good bond. I guess because he just let me buy him Indian food and he made this like custom Rails app that like pulls all the musicians' scheduling from their calendars and pulls the studio's scheduling from their calendar and pulls the client's scheduling from their order form and matches up the times and sends text messages to the musicians that can say, yes, I'll play it.
Wow.
And it books it and it's really fresh. It's pretty awesome.
That's cool,
probably
man.
The coolest thing about our company, I think. No.
Okay, so that's pretty cool, and the idea is that you needed to be able to coordinate everybody, and you were fortunate enough to know somebody that could help you put the app together to help do this. What about for people who hear that and go like, oh well, crap, I don't know somebody who can build an app? Do you say to them give up, or are there options for ways for people to sort of begin to figure out these same coordination things for their own studios?
I think that inside of that instance, like I think we're so quick to jump to like the limitations of what's possible in our scenario. But like, I didn't know that was going to happen. That's only happened in the last, few months. And, like we do this live streaming thing too. This is another relevant part of it is that, like a big kind of cornerstone of what makes our service different and what makes it work is that there's this whole live stream element to it. So there's a camera in front of each musician when you use our service, and there's a camera in front of the engineer and a microphone in front of each musician. And so you're in real time, like able to see and talk to each of the musicians in the studio. And you can also see like the screen that we're working out of in Pro Tools. So you can follow along where we are on the timeline. It's really like being in the studio, but that was never part of the equation. So I think like all along the way, you run into things like, man, like this takes way more time to schedule people than I thought of when I first had the idea. But then you also run into other things like, wow, like I never thought that this part of it was going to turn out so good. So I think you'll run into things, that are positive, unexpected things, just as well as you will things that are unexpected hindrances. And it's just a matter of keeping your head, level through those ups and downs to be able to say like, this is a problem. Like I accept this is a huge problem. I don't know what we're going to do about it. But when you kind of accept it and spend time with it, I think everybody, is able to kind of come up with ways to work around it usually.
That's cool. So did you start this up sort of in a partnership where you had another person to bounce ideas off of and you're kind of all in it together? Or are you really sort of a solo entrepreneur for this idea and you're having to bring people on to contract or hire or whatever role you need them to fill?
Well, our home studio here, Wholehearted Productions, that's a partnership with Christian and I.
Mm-hmm.
And his dream has always been to, like wake up each day and get to work on music that he loves. And so he's really held down the fort with Wholehearted so that I could kind of go off and build this custom tracks thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a company like Custom Tracks is less of his dream. As long as he can stay filled up with people that he can work with, he's happy.
Yeah.
And so Custom Tracks has kind of been my thing, but he's definitely made it possible by doing such a great job and holding down the fort with Wholehearted. All our musicians are like independent contractors, so they can kind of come and go, and whenever they need work, they can pick up work. And if they need to go on tour, they can go do that. So they're not nailed down to us.
Well, that's very cool. Well, all right. Well, thanks for kind of digging into some of that backstory. Let's talk about just the process, man. What do you guys do?
Yeah. So what we focused on most is there are a lot of home studios who can't finish their songs. And I experienced this too, where you can record anytime, but you don't record at all.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of people that maybe are in an apartment and play guitar and can sing, but can't record drums in their apartment, or don't play bass, or don't play dobro or harmonica or something. And we can kind of, help them finish their songs. Like that's been one of our big things is like, let's try to soothe that frustration of being like, what is wrong with me where I can't get stuff done? It's just hanging over my head. Like, it's a lot of people that have like kids and they have a job and they have responsibilities. And so music, it's really hard for them to find musicians and schedule them and like find a time that works with everybody to get in the studio together. And so that's kind of the first problem we've tried to kind of try to solve is like the home studio person who has Pro Tools or has a DAW of some sort, and they need other people. They need that team that existed for, the majority of when records were getting made in the recording industry. You had a band, you had a producer, you had an engineer, and just kind of bringing that team to complement whatever people can do on their own so that it's not quite so overwhelming having to do the whole thing yourself.
Yeah.
So
let me add to that equation. I have a complete studio here, and ask me how often I come down to make my own records too.
Oh, me too, man. Me too, man. Like you got to put it on the calendar, or else it never happens,
Yeah. Well, there's a huge benefit to interacting with people, like scheduling something where you're actually going to do something with people. It'll really get you over that hurdle of producing stuff. So keep going. Keep telling us about this process.
Yeah. Well, so people, for example, the first time I was like, wow, this is exactly, this was like a moment of like, wow, this feels like it's working. There's a guy in Poland who sent us, I think it was 4 songs to do. And he did, guitar and vocals in his apartment. He sent it to us to do drums and bass. And so we got some really fantastic players in the studio. And so he live streams in. He sends us his songs ahead of time through the order form. You can send demos through that. And you can kind of send us some inspirations too, so that we can just briefly get familiar with kind of where your headspace is musically. If you're coming from like, goth rock or mariachi, like we can kind of just get the influence of some of your biggest artists. So we get that too when you fill out an order form. And then usually the musicians, the first 15 minutes of someone's session will kind of do a takedown of the chart, talk about any notes. We started using this really cool thing called flat.io, which is a startup out of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe Sweden. And it's basically like a collaborative chart making software that works kind of like Google Docs does, where you can edit the same sheet of music with multiple people.
Oh, cool.
So we'll do a takedown on that just real briefly so that everybody's literally on the same page. And then we kind of have this mantra that we have to cling to of like, get it right the first time. Because otherwise that's where like the time just runs up and up and up, is like trying to figure out like where we need to punch, or like, if we're trying to do 2 bars before the bridge or after the bridge, or like, what is the bridge?
Yeah.
So we do a takedown the first 15 minutes, and then we talk with the artist while we're doing that about just ideas that they have. They have a thing when they do the order to send us some stuff, but we also like to just get some FaceTime with them and talk to them about what they want. And then once we feel like we're all on the same page, we'll run a couple of takes. And usually we, unless something happens that goes wrong, usually we'll get like 2 full takes in the can, and that's done. And then we'll go back and do any options that they want. So if they want to have like another fill in the chorus, or they want to have, like they want to try the structure being a little bit different, or if they want to go back and do a pass with a guitar solo instead of, just rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
We'll kind of, just get a little bit more creative once we got the bass done.
And now once again, the artist is on a live stream. They're seeing what you guys are doing. You're having some communication while you're doing this stuff.
And they hear the line audio out of Pro Tools. It's like they're listening through headphones in the studio. It's like the same, sounds the same. Unless you're somewhere where you can't get a decent internet connection, there are, like just people for whatever reason, for where they live or just what they're subscribed to. But normally it sounds just like headphones out of Pro Tools. And
do you have any tools you want to recommend to the rock stars? That's who I refer to as our listeners. I call them rock stars. So do you want to refer any cool tools to the rock stars as far as, how you can send audio over the internet like that or video?
I mean, what we do is really simple. Like there's really not anything to it. We use Google Hangouts, and it's weird because a lot of times you can't get audio out of Pro Tools into Google Hangouts. But if you run like a line out into another interface onto another computer, you can just, run it like a line out of your console, your interface or whatever, and then go into another computer and then just set your mic input of that other computer for Google Hangout or for Skype or whatever, just like we're doing here to that source. And then that pretty much gets you to stream audio. There's a cool service called Source Connect that we use sometimes if we do like remote mixing, or Source Connect's pretty cool because it actually streams like AAC audio. I don't know how their technology works exactly, but they stream AAC files in real time with like no noticeable latency. Yeah. And so that's a pretty cool one to check out if you're looking for something. There's a lot of technology. I mean, like there's a lot of tools. I mean, pretty much, my thought is anytime I'm having trouble with something, there's probably a tool for it that someone is building out there,
It's pretty amazing now. You just get on Google to see what's out there. I'm very fortunate to have great interns here in the studio. And I've realized that one of their roles has become, professional Googlers. Yeah. So when we need an answer to something, they're just searching for it, and it's amazing what they'll find.
Tool discovery, yeah.
A couple of other tools, rock stars. There's a plugin called, or an app called Nicecast, which is, I think, only $30 or something like that, and you can use that to stream.
I'm writing this down.
320 audio from your computer and send a mix over the internet that way. And then another one that I've started using recently is just YouTube Live. So you can actually use YouTube Live to stream great quality. But with all these things, they all have different levels of complexity that you have to get familiar with. And what I've learned in my takeaway is whichever one you choose, you just test it. You test it out, and then you sort of see what you like or don't like about it. And if it's limited, you switch to something else. But that's cool, man. Well, so before we keep going on your production, let me back up one step and ask you about that process. Because I think people sometimes when they think about helping get a song ready for an artist who is anybody at all, they might feel like we need to get this song organized. What are the challenges that you run into with an artist as far as getting them to understand the way you're laying out a chart for a song and getting them to sort of get on board with that and not get confused by that process?
You're saying just the workflow of working with studio musicians?
No, the other end, the working with the artist, the singer themselves, when they don't understand how long an intro needs to be or an outro or the arrangement of a song, or they can't play it the same way twice, for example.
Yeah. I mean, half of being a great tracking engineer is just being able to work with people and, make them not feel criticized when you're, I think there's a certain amount of trust that you have to earn. There's just different levels to it. Like when we first start working with somebody, there's a certain threshold I think that we sense, especially with our local artists, of, how much they have their glove out ready to catch ideas or feedback or, criticism.
Yeah.
And I think as we work with people and just build trust and they see that that we really care, that threshold starts to increase a bit, and
That's
they start
cool.
to become more comfortable with more input.
That's great. And I think that kind of thinking, that's the sort of, internal brain thinking that prevents you from starting a business idea like this, because you start overthinking it. You're like, oh, how am I going to sort that out? And then next thing you know, maybe you don't do it. So I like to hear that you have done this and that you've just sort of realized that just having great sort of customer bedside manner and interaction with people is how you get through those challenges.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the studio musicians that we work with really understand, like they've developed that intuition. And I think that's a big part of it, because communication is so much of what makes this session, successful when you're trying to get something out of a session musician or, certainly out of an artist. But that intuition of saying, like, when someone has a note and they don't quite know how to articulate it, like the really great session musicians kind of know what you're going to say. If you just say a couple of words, they're kind of like, I think I got it. Let me try this. And usually they're pretty right on.
Cool. All right. So let's keep going with your process. So you guys, you've got the musicians in, the singer is, watching over the Google Hangouts. They can see and hear what you guys are doing. Mm-hmm. And you do a couple of takes, you go in, you punch some alternate bits. So it sounds like you're assembling the pieces for what you need to put together a good song. Yeah,
exactly. And we have an assistant that afterwards on another computer, we sync everything up through Google Drive. And on another computer, he kind of puts the pieces together and sends some photos from the session to the person and labels all the clips so they're not like snare top 26, whatever, just so everything's nice and clean. And then either sends the WAV files or the Pro Tools session to whoever needs it.
Cool. So then what happens to the session? It leaves you guys and goes elsewhere? Or, do these artists you work with want you to finish a complete mix, or do they want you to send them the track so that they can continue to work on it themselves? How does that work?
Yeah, that really depends. I think predominantly we're doing piecemeal kind of stuff for folks. And this is something that may help studio owners too. I know this has helped me a lot. We have this concept of like kind of our persona of who like we can help the most and who needs our help the most. Mm-hmm. And so we call him Home Studio Henry. And so Henry is the master of his own ship, and he just wants us to help fill in the gaps. He's got the creative vision for it. He wants to at least try to mix it first himself. And so usually we're just being complimentary to what he's got going, and then he's going to try to put it together. A lot of times, like we'll end up mixing stuff at the end of the record or something like that. But that's kind of after they come back from working on it a bit themselves. Yeah. We have a great thing for mixing too, that we don't push as much just because we can only do so much of it. But like price wise and quality wise, it's a good fit for a lot of people.
Well, that's great, man. I love hearing that. So, Home Studio Henry. So Rockstars, what that is to me is that's a message I've heard a lot from people talking about, how to build a business and how to understand. Some people call it your ideal customer. It's deciding before you create your business who it is that you're trying to reach out to and help. Another term for it is your avatar. People talk about it like that. So it's cool to hear that you've sort of taken this approach with your recording studio, because I actually never heard anybody talk about their studio in that same kind of way.
Yeah. Well, it humanizes that kind of archetype that you're speaking to. Instead of like, I think people will like this or they'll like this. It's like, will this resonate? Like, will Henry care about this? Is this something that he struggles with? Yeah. It's just very focused around like kind of a group that we see a lot of folks fit into that we work well with.
Well, so what's interesting to me too is when I've heard that advice of, choose an avatar, create an individual that, like you say, humanizes it, that gives you the ability to say, when I'm thinking about a decision I need to make, it's not vague and abstract. It's like, okay, well, can Henry use this? Will this be good for Henry?
Yeah, exactly.
I think the challenge sometimes when you begin that thinking is to feel like you're just sort of pulling an idea out of thin air. So can you talk a little bit about, how you chose your Home Studio Henry and knew that was a good idea? Did you even know that was a good idea when you started?
I think we had kind of we didn't really, I wasn't consciously like, let's test it, but I just think through like having started the company and seeing, who this resonated with. And it's also not a matter just of who needs music production services, but it's also a matter of like with our resources right now, who can we serve best? Because there's also like what we call the songwriter Sallies, who are like playing songs in their bedroom and don't know anything about the recording piece and kind of need a turnkey solution from start to finish. And, to us, that requires a lot more like blog content about how to send us your stuff. And it requires a lot more video explanations of how to work with us. Whereas the Henrys kind of already get it. So they're like the good first step for us to reach out to. And I think like segmenting stuff that way, and also like the Henrys have jobs and lives, so like price wise, this is a great solution for them, and it's something that they can afford very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so for us, for a first step, it made most sense to fit, like kind of into that group. Whereas I think in the future, we'll start to build the infrastructure to serve more artists who are just playing songs in their bedroom.
Yeah, that's very cool. So I love it. Home Studio Henry and Songwriter Sally. That's
yeah,
great.
They're great folks. They're great.
So it does bring up some points. It's like you do have different customers that have different needs from you, and some need to be educated and brought up to speed about certain things, and others already know all that and just want to get right down to producing this or that or the other thing. And so I imagine that for your Songwriter Sally customer, if you haven't already, you probably have a plan to create videos that explain certain things so that you can share that with them initially and bring them up to speed before they jump in on a video session for the studio with you, for example.
Yeah, I think it's also just a lot of like articles and, I think a big part of it too, for me personally, because this is like my art too. Like a lot of this is about like, who raises their hand and says what they need. But a lot of this is kind of like, in the big picture, like a lot of this is kind of coming from like what I believe about the situation, and that kind of influences the choices that we make too. And part of that is that the Songwriter Sally doesn't need to be spending $10,000 on a record before they have any concept of who's going to listen to it or how to make a return on that. And potentially like that's something that somebody wants to do, and like we're fine with that. But like, we don't want to sell people on their dreams and have them invest a lot of money to something that they're going to be disappointed in, what it reaches. And so with custom tracks, and same thing with our home studio, I really want to build out a lot more of the process for getting traction and entrepreneurializing a lot of these artists before we really focus on people who are of the mindset that they're building this to build a fan base and be a career artist. We also need to build in a lot of the tools as well as the production, the production pieces and the content for that. But also, like, how are they going to make this successful, not just in terms of getting it made, but also getting it into people's ears and creating fans that really thrive off the music.
That's
so
cool.
I think we're also prototyping that locally. And that's a big part of implementing the Songwriter Sally thing, is like, we also have to, educate people about how to get traction and be successful with it.
Yeah, you're empowering the artists rather than just simply enabling them to make the record.
Exactly.
So empowering them with the tools that they need to be able to do something with this record once it's made.
Not so long ago, there was such infrastructure needed to build to be able to start something. And now there's so many tools that are accessible that, like one artist really can get a lot of traction by themselves if they just become very focused at what they want to do and who it's relevant to. So I think it's not unrealistic for us to kind of build that infrastructure for people to start having an application for recording their music, like having a reason to make music that's professionally produced.
Okay, so I got a couple of questions I want to segue to. I want to talk to you about pricing, but first I want to talk to you about the transition from understanding how you kind of help an individual one-on-one to, this wider scope that you're creating, which I think. And the reason I talk about wider scope is because I think that ultimately becomes part of what can make the pricing work. So let me re-explain myself. So as somebody who's made records, I know what it's like to meet with somebody, have them play me a song, one-on-one, work with them, figure out their song, then kind of chart it out, take it into the studio and work with musicians. And, I think some rock stars hearing this will say, oh, I know what it's like to just work with a particular artist or a band. But in order to create sort of a larger scale model like you're doing and to have pricing work, I've learned that you have to create things that are kind of repeatable and scalable on a certain level, right? Efficient. So talk a little bit about that transition from, doing a one-on-one thing to scaling it a little bit more and then determining what kind of pricing structure can work for your business.
Yeah, and that's I think that's where a lot of the work really comes, because that's the difficult thing, is like art is not about being efficient, but also that's really, I think, what we're the best in the world at is the most efficient recording studio that's accessible anywhere. And I think where that efficiency turns into actual quality is just that it makes that level of musician that really does have a huge impact on quality accessible to people who otherwise wouldn't have that option because of the efficiency. So like, with our local studio, we're in this, like you were just talking about, we're meeting somebody, like I said, we're going on a walk with them. Like we're trying to learn their story and trying to help them tell it. And it's a lot of like, face-to-face time and sitting down. And yeah, like you said, it's priced differently. And, with custom tracks, it's different because, typically like nobody needs like, I mean, we take as long as we need, but most of our sessions are out in an hour, like the whole, whether it's a full band or if it's just a, single person playing. So that's a whole different timeline than like working with a local artist. And, I think the reason is just the people can play. And so, it's a lot of like, a lot of it falls on the home studio person to have an idea and to be able to make decisions about like what they want. I think that's another reason why Henry's a good fit for us right now, because there's less of like a producer that needs to work things out and get on the same page. It's more of like, they have an idea and we're there to execute it for them. So I think that changes a little bit of it. But I think a lot of the efficiency, I kind of like went through what the session is like. And so that probably gives a bit of an idea about like the efficiency of it. But yeah, it's having the studio set up, knowing where the gear needs to be dialed into, because we have a high frequency of the same musicians. There's some musicians that kind of are like more one-off, but a lot of the musicians are like, they have the same instrument. It's the same person in the same room on the same gear. So that takes a lot of like the, getting like just finding tones of stuff that kind of simplifies that process of it.
Do you find that when you talk about efficiency, that it's the first steps that are always the least efficient? So in other words, it's that face-to-face interaction initially with a customer that can only be so efficient, and that the efficiency comes a little later once you've got the pieces in place and you guys are hitting the studio to record the song?
I mean, I think so much of it is just a mental thing, man. Like when you have in your head, like, that this is the band and we're going to play through this, and you don't have like all day to go through, get in the weeds about every little thing. Man, I think you can make music worse by getting in the weeds with stuff too much. And it's totally obviously an art to know about like what is worth, like when you're like, because you don't want to cut corners and you don't want to like not spend time on things that you should, but it's very like insidious and tempting to kind of like want to just like baby every little part of the song. And I think that's one of the things that's so appealing about improvisation, is that you're like in the moment making something, and that like this moment right now we have to make count, because we have, it's just like poetry, the form of it, the fact that there are limitations to the medium create beauty in and of itself. So I almost see it that way with the production process, that it's like these constraints of like, we have these limits about how much time we're going to spend with things, I think force people to be more creative or innovative or on point in each moment. Yeah. Everybody's kind of on their toes, and I think that's a great headspace to create in.
I think it is too. So let me go to pricing again for a sec, because I think that another classic obstacle is people saying, I know that making records, say mixing, for example, that mixing with one client could be very quick, with another client could take much longer. How in the world do I ever arrive at a pricing? And so what I want to ask you is, you've figured out ways to build a business model for doing this where you can put a price on the internet. That's the power of the internet, but it's also the big obstacle, because you have to say, this is what I'm offering, So what advice do you have for the rock stars about that? Is pricing like something where you pick one, but that you find that you're often having conversations about how we're going to customize your particular project, and we'll just adjust this way or that way? How does that work?
Like our pricing's super simple. It's so funny. I saw a lot of people were coming to our website from a forum that I hadn't visited before. And so I just, it showed that they were being referred from that forum. So I went and checked out the forum, and it was like 4 pages of people arguing about our pricing, about like, there's no way they can make this pricing work. There's got to be all sorts of hidden charges. And like, there's no hidden charges. Like, it's just, we book a lot of like off hours at the studios. So we have an agreement with the studios we work with where we get like a very good price on the hours at the studios we partner with. And, and for the musicians, it's like shift work for them. So they'll do each session considerably less than what they would charge if they were just, coming in to do a couple of songs. So I think that's like some of where we cut the cost and pass that on to people. Typically based on, most of the options that people have for getting a similar product, we figure about a third of what people would normally pay for it. But pricing is a really difficult thing, man. Like when I started with this, it's so hard to, because like on one hand, my mentality is like, I want this to get into as many people's songs as possible. Like, like I want to make some money off of it, but like, I just want to, like, the money will come from like doing volume of this,
right.
like
From
we don't have to
helping a lot of people.
Yeah, we don't have to have huge margins, but we're like going to be the worldwide studio. Like I want to put all my friends to work around here and see like this thing really grow and become something that becomes a gem for Orlando music. And so it was like, all right, how efficiently and cheaply can we do this? And, we were talking with people that had seen, like customers that had seen the pricing that were considering using our service. And the pricing was throwing them off because it was too low. They were afraid it was going to be low quality, similar to what I was just saying about people arguing on the forum about how low the prices were. Mm-hmm. So it's really a catch-22 because it's like you're trying to make something really valuable for somebody. But on the other hand, we're so confined and like, I think jaded from other marketing that is too good to be true and doesn't work out. That it's really hard to actually give somebody a good value because they won't buy it if they think it's too good,
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of like settled on something where like, I think we've settled on something that's like still a really good fit for Henry. But I think our pricing will evolve as we take on new kind of personas, like as we bring in the Sallys and stuff like that. I think we'll continue to tweak stuff.
Yeah.
So it's always a changing game. It's totally psychological. Like it's really frustrating because, price seems like something that's like, a gallon of milk costs this much, but especially with something like this, it's really psychological to, it's really behavioral economics about what is a good fit for people and what people will use. So it's really frustrating.
It takes a lot to connect all the dots. Sometimes you have to do it for a while before you can step back and look at how much time it takes you to put in and how much your costs are and see how it's all adding up and see how you feel. You get to the end of a week and you're like, wow, did I have a day off? Or did I just work 7 days a week, and make this much money? So,
and it changes at different levels of scale too. So like the pricing, like our cost really depend on how much volume we're putting through. Mm-hmm. Like, as far as what it costs us, because our just the way it works with the studios and with the musicians. So like, that's another really like dynamic piece of the puzzle is it's like, well, if we were just doing like, tracks for people all over the place all the time, then, we could, it's just kind of like, like mass manufacturing stuff, like the marginal cost would go down a bit on each thing. So that's like another, like price is a wormhole.
Yeah.
But fortunately with the home studio, it's pretty simple. You just figure out like, like we're doing this job, like this is what the market price would be for like our local area. And potentially like, like if someone were to do a record at this price, like, I don't think they've got 10 grand to pay on their record. Like, let's figure out something for a bundle for song, like you can kind of, it's a little more simple maybe in that term.
It helps to know who home studio Henry is and what his budget is, because if you're just guessing, you could invent something that sounds like it would be a really fantastic deal if somebody's got $10,000 to spend. But if they don't have a $10,000 budget, it's not going to matter.
Right. And you have to really define your expectations. Like, for us, I'm 23. Like our goal is just to make as much great music and be able to work on our craft every day. Like, we're getting paid by the coin of experience a lot, as we've grown here. So like, if we're not getting super rich right now, totally fine. Like, we just want to be able to float the boat and build a great community here.
Yeah.
And so that's another important piece to keep in mind too.
Well, Dane, I like hearing you talk, man. You're dropping so many fantastic quotes. Like, I'm getting paid by the coin of experience.
That wasn't mine. I don't know who said that.
That's great. I love it. All right. Well, so thanks for kind of digging into that, because I know these are all sort of classic struggles for studio owners. Let's talk a little bit more about, just more advice about stuff people might need to know. So, for example, what are some things that rock stars should watch out for when working with clients over the internet? What are some, typical things to just, hey, when you start something like this, here's some things to watch out for?
I think it's just hard to get people comfortable and like, earn people's trust early on to start a project. I think like that's the trickiest part to me, is just like finding a way to make people feel familiar with you if they haven't met you in person yet.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, it's having a podcast.
Yeah. For me, it's being on your podcast, honestly. I mean,
it's cool because it's just this opportunity to just have a normal conversation and include you rock stars. So
yeah.
That's one of the big reasons why I love doing this. Well, so how about some of the basic tools for building an online business? What are some of the elements that go into putting all this together, that if you were just to sort of describe the basics to listeners?
Yeah. When I started it, I think this is cool. We just built like one page, and I did it on WordPress. I've used all the other services, but I like WordPress. It's a pain to learn, but it's so extendable that like once you kind of get the learning curve, it really is, I think, worth learning just because it's so universal. But I just made one page to test out the custom tracks idea, and I ran some Facebook ads to people who like owned Pro Tools and Ableton and Logic, and I just put the idea out there. Like it was just like a headline, like collaborate with world-class session musicians through a live stream. And I just want to see if people would click it, like if the idea would resonate. And I kind of set a goal of like, I want to spend like $5 and have this many people click on it. And then I'll say like, okay, I'll build the rest of the site. And this is a big thing in like tech, is just like, I think obviously as your business grows, like the tools that you need change a lot, but it's like how few tools can you use to decide if the raw value of like your idea or what you're trying to bring to people is something that they really care about. And you can find the people that care about it, because that's the other part of it.
Well, that kind of comes from the Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Workweek advice too. I don't know if you're familiar with the book. I'm guessing you are.
I haven't read it, but
you haven't read it?
I've heard about it a lot. Yeah.
It's the textbook for online business and for a lot of people and starting your own thing. But he talks about that, about making a page, putting it out there, finding out if there's people clicking through to discover whether or not anybody's interested.
Yeah, it's this concept of minimum viable product. And I think that you can iterate a lot, and you could really find what resonates by not like building the whole grand scheme and investing everything you have into something that potentially is of your liking, but you like it because you built it, and you find that you haven't figured out how to get it into other people's hands yet. Well,
I'm going to take your story at face value too, and really appreciate the fact that you talked about starting out, just kind of doing order up deliveries, driving around your car and taking that income to invest in small bits of, the next things you want to do.
And we had the studio income too, the local stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's cool because there is this idea sometimes that, to start a business, you have to have a lot of money to make money, and it's not, It's not true. You do have to work really hard, but you have to take what funds you have initially and just sort of invest them wisely in the right places in the right ways. And you talk about something like placing Facebook ads. Well, if what did you say? You spent $5 and tried to see if you could get a couple of click-throughs here and there. To find out if people were responding. So that's cool, All right, well, keep going. So you had a website, WordPress. That's what I use too. I'm guessing a lot of rock stars are familiar with that. What's another tool that you might need to sort of assemble all the parts?
I think one of the important parts that gets overlooked, ironically, because it might be the most important, is some sort of conversion, you can call it. It's kind of a dirty marketing word that's a little impersonal, but like either like time that people spend reading your article, or signups to your email list because people are interested in the idea once they click the Facebook ad and they want to find out more, or a track that somebody can purchase, like something that you can say like, this was the goal and like this many people completed it. I think that's especially for musicians, like they just want to get their stuff out there. They have no idea how much people are engaging with it, and I think that's a huge weakness because you can't ever achieve any of your expectations because you don't know if you're achieving. You don't have any. So I think like a good analytics platform, like there's a cool analytics tool called Lucky Orange.
Okay.
We just search for Lucky Orange. This really helps a lot in the early stages. And one of the creepy things you can do with this is it kind of like recreates a video of somebody going through the site, like not of the person, but just like of their screen. And it really helps you visualize like what someone's experience is going through your site. So you can see like, it's just like after you've looked at your site 100 times, it helps to see somebody go through it. Like it helps you see it fresh. And that can be really valuable because you might find that there's buttons that don't work, or there's just stuff that like you meant to fix that looks wonky, but you just got used to it. And then you're like, oh man, they're seeing that. Like I meant to fix that. That can be useful.
That's cool. So that's sort of a heat map sort of thing. That's another concept where you can see, it
has heat maps, but it's actually like you can see them scrolling, and you can see if their mouse pointer goes over each word. You can watch it. It's like a heat map, but it really humanizes it. So you can really feel like what they're feeling going through it.
Rock stars, imagine if you finished your record and then you got to have a video watching, people listen to your record and enjoy the whole experience, and you knew which parts they liked the most.
Well, and you can really do that as a musician because, like, for me, we had these before and afters on our website, and I wanted to know, like how important is it the before and after? Like, do people want to see the pricing page first or the about? Like, what are the questions people are asking themselves? And I could see like, okay, people listen to this much of the before and the after. So I really need to get like the stuff that really shines to be inside of this window of time that most people spend listening to it. And the same thing with like, like if you've got a song and people are only listening through the verse, like you have to get a stronger verse and pre-chorus to get people into that killer chorus. And you don't know that if you're not, measuring how long. If you have it on your website, you can see how long somebody's listening to your song. And that really helps you like prototype your songs and your content. And
well, Apple came up with the idea a long time ago, right? So when you listen to the samples on iTunes Music, they would always take a sample right from the hook of the song, around the chorus or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Don't bore us, get to the chorus.
Don't bore us, get to the chorus. All right. So we've got our WordPress, we've got our conversion measurements, which means you have to decide what it is that you're trying to do and measure it essentially, right?
What was that? I'm sorry.
We're talking about conversion metrics. Essentially, it means you have to decide what action you're hoping somebody will do, whether it's sign up for an email list or whether it's go to a particular place on your website, and measure how well that's working.
Right. And the real thing is like, is somebody a fan? Like that's always the thing. Like we ask ourselves, like, how do you build fans? Like, how do you make stuff that really matters to people with your music? And for us, the metric has been, do people know the words to the songs? So we've been trying to figure out ways to like, our goal for our local artists is to throw like a backyard concert for them where they have the whole audience sing the lyrics to one of their songs. Cause then we know that they're really fans that dig this music. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So I guess I was going to ask you, how do you reach new clients? But it sounds like you're using Facebook. Are there some other ways when, what advice do you have for people who just get scared when they think about doing a Facebook ad? They're like, I don't even know what that is.
It's kind of like a new land, it's kind of like a new. So I'd just say like, take the pressure off. Don't feel like you've got to produce anything valuable. Watch a bunch of videos, figure out who the kooky people are and don't watch their videos anymore. And then find some people you really trust that you feel like are, because there's a lot of like, like get rich quick marketing stuff. And I mean, you can check that out if you like, but for me, that has kind of misses the point a little bit. But, try to find some good sources and just enjoy learning about the new kind of aspect of it and just, kind of just get familiar with the language, because trying to jump right in, I mean, Facebook tries to make it easy, but like, it's just good to have some background and some experience with it before you feel like you got to jump into making something that gets sales right away. It's kind of a practice, it's kind of just like a new thing to learn, like a new instrument to learn how to play. There's a lot you can do with it. It's very creative. So it helps to kind of just that's what I did. I took about 6 months and I just kind of was like, I really want to learn about this because, we're making a lot of music in the house. I want to figure out how to reach people with this because that's what it's all about. And so, I'm just going to kind of enjoy learning about this stuff. I think that was really the first part of it.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. Do you have more advice just for rock stars who might be thinking about launching a new business idea? I know we've talked about a lot, but just keep riffing on it. Anything that you would say to somebody else when you met them and they just said, I'm thinking about, starting an online studio. What's some of the first things you tell them?
First of all, do it. I mean, like they'll like, I think when you ask people for advice, you kind of get water poured on you because people are like, because you really know your shit yet at all. And like, but you have that passion and that's valuable. Like, don't let anybody take that away from you. They probably wish that they still had that same fire. And that's one of the things I love about having all these artists around us in town is like, they're so like, they don't have any idea like what the plan is, what the strategy is, but they're just so on fire about their music that it keeps that spark. So I would say like, just find people you trust to talk about your dreams with. Like find people that aren't going to just like make you feel like you don't know what you're doing. Cause you probably like, everybody to some degree doesn't know what they're doing and you have more to learn all the time. So don't let somebody invalidate where you're starting, I guess is
nice.
One thing. And I would just try to find, I think the more that you can focus, like, and this is like a really spiritual thing almost to me, but like the more that you can not need stuff yourself, the more capacity you have for taking on other people's needs. And I think that that's where you really create solutions when you actually really care about like someone else's experience. Otherwise, it's really hard to make something that's genuinely valuable, which makes it hard to genuinely like have a successful project.
That's interesting. What advice do you have for people about getting to a place where they don't need so much for themselves?
I turn the TV off. I mean, like, I think it's something we're so inculcated with and surrounded by, and it's just kind of this mechanism of like, there are a lot of voices in all of our lives that tell us that we need something else, and certainly custom tracks falls into that to some degree. That and anything does it, that like you need to consume more to be able to be successful. When really, like, we all know that starting something is about not consuming but producing something.
All right, so one more question, then we're going to take a break here and do the jam session. But Dane, tell us, like, how do you know if your business is succeeding or failing when you launch something like this? What are some of the indicators that let you know that you're doing the right stuff? Or what advice do you have for somebody to just kind of be aware?
If you've set those goals and those expectations for, like we were saying, like time on the page or people that know the words to your song, like you can kind of measure yourself against those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But I think, for a long time, you're not going to have those things be successful. And it's just kind of important to be very honest with yourself and have people that help you be honest with yourself about, like, if you're making progress, if you're growing, if you're gaining the skills and the knowledge, that there's definitely a process of incubation where you're not going to be getting returns on stuff. And I think that, like accepting that and being okay with it, but also finding ways to get to market as quickly as possible, to get whatever you have that's valuable into someone's hands so they can say, or they can say, whoa, as quickly as possible. Because then you kind of start to build evidence that can help other people get excited about your project. You can show them the progress that you're making. But I think at the root of it, it's very much an internal thing.
Very cool. Well, great advice. Rockstars, we're going to take a break now and we'll come back in just a moment for the jam session. Before we do, I want to remind you that I'm going to include the stuff we're talking about here with Dane Myers. It's going to be in the show notes, which you can find right on your podcast listening app if you're on your phone, or just go to rsrockstars.com and then use the magnifying glass, which you'll find there. And you can just search for Dane. It'll take you right to the podcast episode blog post. And then also, if you enjoyed the music at the beginning of the podcast, that's actually my record called Skadoosh, and you can go check that out at skadooshmusic.com, which is SKADOOSH. And then if you are enjoying the podcast and you just really like your studio and you want to let people know that you're a rock star yourself, get yourself a t-shirt. We got great t-shirts for Recording Studio Rockstars, and you can find that at rsrockstars.com/t-shirt. All right, Dane, thanks for being on the show, man. We'll see you in just a sec for the jam session.
Sounds good.
Hey everybody, it's Lid Shaw, and I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of Recording Studio Rockstars. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your time. And as a way of saying thank you, I've created a special mix tutorial just for you, Rockstars, totally free, called the Mix Master Bundle. With it, you get over 2 hours of detailed videos watching over my shoulder as I mix a song in my studio. Plus, I give you the free ebook that explains how I recorded the tracks, and you get downloadable multi-tracks so that you can practice your mixes, including the Pro Tools session file, using nothing but stock plugins in Pro Tools, all of which you would find in any other DAW, whether you're on Logic or Studio One or Reaper. Maybe you're struggling with trying to improve your mix technique, or maybe you just simply don't have access to multi-track files or can't record a full drum set in your studio. I wanted to give you a chance to create your own mixes from full drum kit, bass, and guitars recorded in my studio. The song is called American Winter, and it's off my instrumental record Skadoosh, and it's all available for you totally free right now. All you need to do to get it is text Mix Master Bundle to 33444, and I'll send it directly to your email. Again, that's Mix Master Bundle with no space to 33444, or you can go directly to mixmasterbundle.com, enter your email, and I'll send all the files directly to you. Thanks so much, Rockstars. We'll see you guys in the jam session. Cheers. Hey, Rockstars, we're back. It's Lid Shaw. You're listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. My guest today is Dane Myers. We're about to jump into the jam session. Dane, are you ready to jam?
Let's do it.
All right, dude. So when you started out in recording, what was holding you back?
Taking a year and a half to set up my first interface.
Just trying to get the gear hooked up, right?
Yeah. No, I think getting to market soon enough was a big one. Like we were just talking about, is just like, it's really encouraging and helps you move forward to have people appreciate what you're doing. So like, make the best thing you can and then try to ship it, like send it to somebody and see their reaction. That helps you, I think, move forward.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I actually go through that all the time because I've been creating different products for recording studio rock stars, and each one is sort of on some level a new idea, and I really want to get it right. And with the internet, there is a sense that you're about to press it like the go button, and it's out of your hands when you press the go button.
Absolutely.
But inevitably, I find that my brain can stop me from pressing the go button. And sometimes I'm like, just screw it. Let's just press the button, send that email. You can get to the next one that much quicker. It's kind of like songwriting, right? They say that you've got a lot of bad songs in the way. That's why you have to write so many songs. You got to get the bad ones out of the way for the good ones to come through. And I think it's true with your business stuff too.
Absolutely.
All right. So how about some of the best advice you remembered receiving about recording or business?
Just treat other people the way you want to be treated. It's so simple. Like just do a good job that you'd want somebody to do for you. Like to me, that's the simple reality of it.
That's good advice too. I think I heard that from another long-haired, bearded guy, or at least in some pictures he looked like that from a couple of thousand years ago. But that is really good advice. And I think that instinctively we understand that. And there's it's understandable to treat somebody well because you would like to be treated well. I think sometimes when you're launching, you're making records and you're putting your best into it, or you're trying to like create a new business idea. Part of the challenge is we want to treat others really well, but we just don't always know how to do something well yet. We see somebody, we listen to somebody else's record and it sounds really fantastic, and we want to make a fantastic record for somebody else. But we don't always know exactly how to do that. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Mine are just kind of like, be considerate to yourself, treat yourself nice so that you can actually, allow yourself to make some mistakes through the process and just do your best.
Absolutely. And nobody wants to see you put yourself through the meat grinder of like never being good enough. And I think that that's a poor experience for somebody else to see. Ultimately, I think it just comes down to you being yourself. Like, how much can you be yourself and empower that person to be good being themselves too,
Yeah. All right, cool. So now how about sharing a favorite recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something our rock stars could use today in their recording session?
Right now we have we've got a U87 and some an Apollo and like a good computer and stuff so we've got some gear and some experience, and like the quality of our stuff has gotten better and better. But the number one thing that I think helped us stand out and get a foothold here, like I think we're probably working on 40 songs for different local artists right now with our local studio. And the secret sauce the whole time has just been to care about your artist's music, and they will sense that and they'll come back to you if you can find people that inspire you, or if you can find things that you love about what people are doing. If you can genuinely find that in your heart to care about what people are doing, they will appreciate that because their music is so important to them.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's, wait a minute, isn't that the name of your studio? Isn't it? What was
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think that is great advice. It's how I like to run my sessions here. I like to always remember that the people that are bringing in their music, it means a lot to them or everything to them.
Absolutely.
And they need to have a great experience,
Yep.
Well, all right. So how about a favorite hardware tool, something physical that you really like to have on sessions that you want to talk about, or something new that you sort of recently discovered?
Yeah, we always struggled with our computer being able to handle stuff. And when we got an SSD drive, like everything got so much better. So I would say if you're having trouble with your rig being stable and stuff's crashing, or it's just really slow, which slow can be really uninspiring if you're trying to create stuff in the moment and your computer's lagging you down.
Oh, Lord, I know it.
Try getting an SSD drive because that made the world of difference to us.
Talk about that for just a sec. When you needed something like a hard drive, where do you look?
We just got ours off Amazon. We actually got a new computer, and it was still like a bit slow, and we had gotten an SSD separately with it, but we hadn't installed it. And, even on the new computer, it made a big difference to go from, because we're running stuff off of, at the time we were just running stuff off of our local drive. Mm-hmm. So to have that SSD, we just grabbed one off Amazon.
I know that for somebody like myself who's been in the studio for a long time, I've become indoctrinated with this idea that there's all kinds of different quality in computers and stuff like that. I don't know if that's always the same case any longer. When you go look for an SSD drive, do you sort of dig around and do a ton of research, or do you find that most of the stuff you find is going to be good enough?
I think I looked for something that was like about $100, and I think I was looking at like space versus price with, it probably had 4 or 5 reviews, which I know somebody who used to write Amazon reviews for a living, so I don't know how much that means, but yeah, I mean, there's nothing like, no special like spec that I really looked into for that. It was just, pretty much probably anything off the shelf is going to be pretty good.
Yeah. So rock stars, don't let trying to upgrade your gear, become too much of an obstacle because you're worried you're getting the wrong one when it comes to that.
That makes me think of Gear Sluts, where to me, that's just an environment where people ruminate about kind of esoteric things to me. But hearing that guy in the last episode that got his gig with Prince from being on the Gear Sluts forum, I thought he was kidding at first. And I was so wowed. And I was like, I don't have no idea what I'm talking about. Gear Sluts is amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was Chris James. Was just talking to him yesterday. I think Gear Sluts is pretty incredible. I mean, I don't go on it a ton myself, but it's been around for ages. And how cool to just have a forum where people can go chat. It's just that it's such a wide open forum that, of course, you've got some people that want to talk about stuff that's going to be really helpful to you. And you've got some folks that are talking about stuff that's not going to help you with whatever your solution is you need right at that moment. So that's just like, that's the internet in general,
That's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
So now how about a favorite software tool, something cool you've recently discovered that you want to share with the rock stars?
The Steven Slate stuff I think is really cool. I started back with like Trigger, and actually I started with his SSD. That's what it's called, right? We're just talking about an SSD drive, but Steven Slate drums. And like we used that for a while. We had some electronic drums. We used that, and we've kind of just like got his stuff as he came out with new stuff. And I haven't gotten to try out his new VMS stuff yet, but I'm really interested in, that emulation stuff. I think that's relevant for a lot of people that don't have huge budgets.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of people I trust saying that they think it's, it's close enough, man. So
yeah, the VMS is the virtual microphone simulator, right?
Yes. Yep.
So now, quick aside on that, you're interacting with Home Studio Henry. Do you see something like a virtual microphone sort of allowing Home Studio Henry to get, one microphone that really does sound pretty great for doing all the vocal overdubs, but they could still interact with you guys in your pro studios with the professional musicians?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, like we do that kind of, we do like a lot of the emulation stuff in our home studio. And then when we do the custom track stuff, like we're in a world-class studio with the real deal. And I think for drums, it makes a difference. I think like for acoustic guitar, we've done acoustic guitar on a U87 in the big studio with the same musician, and then had to like come redub it at our home studio later with a U87. Mm-hmm. And you can put them side by side, and like, man, I couldn't tell you the difference at all.
Right.
So I think that's a very empowering thing to think about, like, because you never know like what the secret sauce is of those big studios, and you wonder if you're missing out. But I think it really is true that you can do a lot from your home, if not most everything.
Well, it's true that drums they're big, loud, energetic instrument. And so they really do respond to the space in the room and everything like that. In fact, I just had Derek Bostrom on the show from the band The Meat Puppets. And he talked about, going into a studio the night before, even if he could, and just like playing drums in the space to get to really know it and get the sound.
Yeah.
All right. So now how about a resource for the business side of running a studio? What would you like to tell people about? Is there some online tool that's really helpful for running a studio?
Oh, this is another great thing too. If you have a university near you, a lot of times there are a lot of students that need internship credit. And if you have a home studio and you need help with the business side of stuff, they probably have an experiential learning department or an internship department. And you'll find some kids that are really, really passionate about music. And if you can provide them with stuff that will help them secure a higher paying job in the future, they'll be happy to work on something in music.
Very cool.
So to manage our team, we use a lot of stuff like Slack is a cool tool for communicating. Mm-hmm. We also use Asana, which is a great tool for delegating and keeping track of a lot of tasks that we need to get done. Learning how to use Google Sheets is a huge one. Like our whole invoicing system for our local studio is like this linked set of Google Sheets that we use. And it's like each artist has a page. And when we put in their hours and like who worked on their session, it links up to like a master sheet for like it's kind of like QuickBooks, but it's just something that we built over time out of Google Sheets. But you can do a lot in there, and it's it's really helpful to be able to customize it however you need if you can kind of start like building acumen with that.
Yeah, I love using spreadsheets. I use them all the time. Mostly it's for very simple stuff, like just simply adding up, a bunch of numbers and seeing what the sum is. But it's pretty cool how you can customize them, and you can have cells link from one sheet to another. So if you change a number or a rate here, or you say, what if we did 10 songs instead of 20 songs on this session? What would it cost then? You can get this thing to calculate out and show you what your numbers are.
Right. And we have all our costs in there against all of our revenue, and it just helps really like give us a good dashboard.
How do you keep your files straight?
Yeah, Google Drive is I mean, I think they're all really similar, like Dropbox, Google Drive. I think Microsoft has like OneDrive, but just kind of that, synced in the cloud storage space. I think you can get a terabyte on Google Drive for like $10 or something like that. So
nice.
So yeah, we use that a lot.
What is that? What you use to have a client send their mix over to you and send it back to them, or do you just does most stuff work as an MP3 attached in an email?
That actually takes place through our order form, which just to get everybody on our order form page, if you go to our site customtracks.com and you go to like start your song, that's a type form, which is a plugin that's also accessible. It's just something that you can subscribe to and use on your site. But it's great because it'll calculate, like for us, it's like if you pick an instrument, based on the number of instruments, it'll change the price for somebody, and they can pay right there on the form, and they can send us their files through the form and pick their scheduling through the form. So that's another good tool. But that's how we do all like the demos and the incoming stuff from an order.
That's cool. All right. So next question, last couple of questions here are both hypothetical. And this one you've already sort of answered in different ways too, but I'll ask it again. If you were sort of restarting over, or you were giving advice to somebody else who's just starting out, they needed a simple setup to record with, they needed to find people to record with and make music, and they needed to make ends meet. You want to sort of recap what advice you would give to somebody to start out?
I would get like a laptop. I like these ATH M50 headphones. Like I wouldn't even worry about, getting like reference monitors or anything. Maybe just like an Axiom keyboard so you can play stuff. And then if you had Pro Tools, and I've been kind of screwing around with this Shure Motive 51 mic, which is what I'm using right now. It's just a USB mic. It seems to be pretty cool so far. So that'd be gear wise. I definitely, one of the big things, like the biggest difference in our traffic for our home studio, and I'm so pumped about this, it's just a beautiful thing that I hope other people will do, is start a songwriter night in your town, a place for people who are creative to come like meet other people. And what we do is we have them play new songs. That's what we started doing, like play your new songs, because we thought, we'll get a bunch of people playing new songs into the studio. And then, but people just playing songs. Like now we've grown it into like people we're like the people that collaborate. So it's going to be like duos, like co-writing stuff. They'll perform first at the next songwriter night we're having, which encourages people to just get together and kind of cross-pollinate with their knowledge and their skills. And then start a biz night, a music biz night, where you get people in your town who are in the industry to come speak, and they love to come speak. Like they love to come see artists, like, they love to come create sparks and see people like get started in their career. So get some, like some PR people, or some entertainment lawyers, or just some artists that have gotten some traction to come, make a PowerPoint presentation and speak in your studio to artists in your community. That's a great way to get people in where they don't have to buy anything, or they don't have to book any studio time, but just have a night where people can kind of come start to learn the atmosphere and the environment of your place. Yeah. And that has really created a lot of trust and a lot of work for us, just having those free events for people to come experience and get a lot of benefit from. And then I would definitely, if I was in a new town, sign up on Uber or on some sort of delivery service to prevent me from just being a stress freak about money all the time. So if I was short, I knew I could go drive and I could make up the difference. And I think that would be my plan.
That's good. Did you find that when you were doing the driving gigs, it gave you an opportunity to listen to music too?
Oh, I love the driving gigs, because when you're building your own business, you have to figure out everything. And when you're doing a driving gig, it's so easy, and people give you money for it. Like you just get in a car and you go drive and you pick up food and you take it to somebody else and they give you money. And it's like, you don't have any responsibility. So it's really refreshing if you have like your own business that is really high intensity, to just get in the car and drive around, like you said, listen to music and just like not have so much responsibility, but still be like productive and doing what you need to do.
Oh, well, who am I kidding? What am I talking about? Listen to music. You need to listen to Recording Studio Rockstars on your driving gig.
Yeah, you do. You need to get a good podcast to listen to brush up on all the information and the knowledge you need.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, actually, that's really good advice because all that drive time, there are so many podcasts that can teach you about all these things we've been talking about, Facebook ads and WordPress and online stuff. It's how I absorbed it all. It's how I learned all this stuff. So you can learn a ton that way, rock stars. All right, so now we're going to do the last question here, Dane. Thank you again for being on the show with us.
Thank you for having me.
This one is hypothetical too. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. I don't know how far, I mean, you're 23 and I'm really impressed with how, sort of advanced you are with all this stuff you're doing. I don't know how far back we need to go for Wayback, but I'll let you decide that. You're going to go back and meet younger Dane in this time machine, and you're going to go tap yourself on the shoulder. You turn around and say, hey, ancient 23-year-old Dane, what are you doing here? And you say, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know, Dane, to be a recording studio rock star yourself. What would you tell yourself? What advice would you give?
Keep the love, but realize that hope isn't a strategy, and recognize the difference between inner success, if you're doing what you want to do every day, and be patient with the outer success that you need to validate yourself and feel like you're not out on a limb all the time. Be patient with yourself, but at the same time, get a strategy, and hope really isn't a strategy.
Yeah, I love that, man. If that was even a little bit shorter, I was going to print everything you just said on a t-shirt and just wear that every day.
Yeah, I could use one of those too.
Great advice. Well, Dane, thank you again, man, for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm terribly impressed with you and all the work that you've done, man. I think you're doing a great job, great work. And I think that the rock stars listening to this ought to be very impressed and very inspired. I really appreciate that you have sort of like a don't hold back attitude, and that you are not looking at the future of music and recording as something that's, of bygone days, but it's wide open to you and whatever you want to do, which is inspiring.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know who, you may have a lot of international audience, but for me, like a lot of the political and social things happening right now, like I feel like we need the music. Like we need artists that are going to be great artists and lead us to be more understanding of ourselves and each other so that we don't conflict so much. And to me, music is like all the things I look at that frustrate me, I can come back to music and feel okay, like being part of it. And so I feel like all the people out there, like we need you to do great work, and we need you to bring, art and make it matter and make it connect with people.
Yes, dig it. All right, Dane. Well, let the rock stars know how they can find you, follow you, learn more about you, and reach out to you.
Yeah. You can, of course, check out Custom Tracks, custom-tracks.com. And you can feel free to email me. My email is just Dane, DANE, @customtracks.com. And again, that's custom-tracks.com. And yeah, I usually can get back to you pretty quick. If you just have a question or something like that, I'd be happy to help out.
Are you guys doing social media too and all that?
Yeah. We have an Instagram. We have a Facebook, which is just facebook.com/customtracks, no hyphen there. And Instagram.com/custom_tracks.
Nice.
Yeah. So very,
we'll put all that in the show notes too.
We'll put some links up. We'll
throw some links in the show notes, rock stars. Just a reminder, you can see those if you're on your phone or something like that. Usually you can just click right through and they should just show up right there with the podcast episode. And you can just touch it with your finger to click right through the link. So we will see you around the studio, Dane. I look forward to meeting you in person sometime. And
Absolutely.
rock stars, reach out to him, check out Custom Tracks. Yeah, I know we didn't get into it, but maybe at some point you'll be looking for more musicians in more places. So it's a great way to connect.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen.
All right, groovy, dude. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.